2, 1.
7 things you probably didn't know you need to know. I'm Jamie East, and this is the Standout.
Over the next 7 minutes or so, we'll look back at a week that saw a tidal wave of strike action, a racism row in Buckingham Palace and protests in China. We also saw England qualify for the knockout stages of the World Cup, a breakthrough on a new Alzheimer's drug and tributes to a Fleetwood Mac legend. It's been a busy one, but we'll get you up to speed in next to no time. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7. Don't forget to hit the follow button to get your daily updates at 7am.
7.
'Tis the season to go striking, apparently. With Christmas just around the corner, the unions are ramping up their industrial action with another round of strikes for rail workers, and the NHS are joining in on the walkouts too. Ambulance drivers, paramedics, cleaners, porters, catering staff, clerical workers and junior doctors are also among those who could join nurses in walking out over the coming months. The TUC's head of public services, Kevin Rowan, blames the government.
The only thing that they feel they can do to try and get the government to listen to them is to take industrial action. You know, it's a real blight on this government, really, that we've got to this stage.
The GMB union says paramedics, call handlers and other staff will walk out at 9 trusts and are reportedly discussing dates before Christmas. Ambulance crews who are members of Unison have already voted for industrial action. And although he says he's full of admiration and gratitude for nurses, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says their pay demands are unrealistic.
It is simply unreasonable and unaffordable to have a 19% pay rise. I'm sure the Labour Party can explain to us how they would pay for that.
Dr Layla McKay from the NHS Confederation told Times Radio their priority was to make sure services were running well and patients were safeguarded.
This sort of decision to take industrial action isn't one that anybody takes lightly. The concerns are real, but there's a lot of challenge there, and it really needs to be discussed and a solution needs to be found.
And over at a packed UCU rally in London, the RMT Union's Mick Lynch had this message for Labour politicians.
Where is the front bench? Where are they? When people are in struggle, the Labour Party should be with us here and now. And if you want to hide in the Palace of Westminster, there are no neutrals in this struggle.
A royal aide whose Prince William's godmother has resigned over remarks she made to a black guest at a Buckingham Palace reception. Ngozi Fulani says Lady Susan Hussey, who was the late Queen's lady-in-waiting for over 60 years, repeatedly asked where she really came from during the event on Tuesday. The anti-domestic abuse campaigner shared the details in a Twitter post describing it as a violation. Here she is on LBC.
When I came in and everybody else, of course you get searched because you want to make sure there's no danger to the staff. But what about the danger to us? So conversations need to be held with the relevant people so that this kind of thing does not happen again.
A spokesperson for Prince William says it's right that Lady Susan Hussey has stepped down, whilst the palace has called the comments unacceptable. Mandu Reid from the Women's Equality Party was there when it happened. She believes the incident validates Meghan Markle's previous claims of racism in the royal household.
I want to see the royal household as a whole acknowledge that institutional racism is part of the culture, and I want to see them tackle that head on.
Russia's continuing strikes on Ukraine's power grid have done serious damage. The country as a whole is suffering from a 30% shortage of electricity, and the ongoing attacks have left Ukrainian energy companies struggling to find enough spare parts to manage repairs. At a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Bucharest on Tuesday, there was an appeal for further assistance and generators from its European neighbours. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg also took the opportunity to reiterate NATO's ongoing support for Ukraine.
President Putin is trying to use winter as a weapon of war, which is inflicting a lot of suffering on the Ukrainian people.
This week also saw the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, make a 3-day visit to the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, where he's been meeting with civilians and church leaders to show support during the ongoing invasion. Meanwhile, Ukrainian First Lady Elena Zelenska was in the UK this week, joining King Charles as he opened a new welcome centre for Ukrainian refugees in London. She wants the UK to lead the way in prosecuting Russia for war crimes in her country and called on the Prime Minister to create a special court for suspected criminals.
But victory is not the only thing we need. We need justice. I came to you for justice, because justice will lead to the end of this war.
Ms Zelenska previously told MPs in Westminster that Ukraine was being bombed like British cities were during World War II. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said they're working to help repair and replace energy infrastructure that's been targeted by Putin.
What we're seeing is barbaric, and precisely because Putin is not able to succeed on the battlefield, he's taking the war to Ukraine's civilians, and he's doing it in a very deliberate way.
Protests have continued to spread in China as citizens push back against Xi Jinping's zero-COVID policy. Hundreds of demonstrators and police clashed from Beijing to Shanghai in the most significant public display of defiance since Tiananmen Square. The wave of civil disobedience is unprecedented in mainland China in the past decade and is the biggest test for President Xi Jinping since he secured a historic third term in power. One BBC journalist got caught up in the commotion. He was tackled and arrested by the Chinese police.
Hey, are you okay? Barry, call the consulate now.
Meanwhile, a protester outside the Chinese consulate in London said that the people need to stand up against their government's oppression.
People in China are being oppressed. Every group of people are being oppressed. And we have been oppressed for years and decades. And we want to change that. Somebody needs to stand up. We need to stand up to stand against this authoritarian regime.
And spokesperson for the Chinese Communist Party, Victor Gao, says he thinks the government will listen.
It is very rare for a massive protests to take place in multiple cities in China. Therefore, I do believe that the Chinese government authorities will need to analyze the situation very carefully and do their best to heed the legitimate demands as expressed in many of these protests.
Still to come on the Standout 7, a week of World Cup drama and tributes to a Fleetwood Mac legend. Right after this. Welcome back.
The Qatar World Cup's finally settled down to focus on football, and this week saw the end of the first round of games. Tuesday's big game saw England facing Wales while the US took on Iran. The US beat Iran 1-0 to progress to the next round. And after much agonising, Gareth Southgate finally played Phil Foden, and the Man City player grabbed a goal along with two from Marcus Rashford to see the game finish England 3, Wales 0. Southgate's men will face Senegal next, while Wales and the injured Gareth Bale headed home. Marcus Rashford spoke about that free kick after the game.
Do you know what? I fancied one in the first half, but to be fair, the one in the second half was in a better position. And you know, from there it's just about being calm and just trying to execute what you practice in training. They don't go in often, but I'm pleased that I went in today.
The big story on Wednesday was in Group D, which saw France beat Tunisia and Australia pull off a 1-0 win over a lacklustre Denmark to join the French in the last 16. Australia's qualifying for the knockout stages led to huge crowds celebrating at 4 a.m. in Melbourne. But coach Graham Arnold was keeping his feet on the ground.
No celebrations, no emotion, sleep, no social media.
Thursday saw history made as an all-female referee team took charge of a men's World Cup match for the first time in Germany's 4-2 victory over Costa Rica. Even with a win, Germany were headed home as Japan beat Spain to get to the last 16. The biggest shock of the day, though, saw Belgium knocked out of the tournament completely following a goalless draw with Croatia. It was a dramatic end for the team, which finished third at the 2018 World Cup, followed by the announcement that long-term manager Roberto Martinez would be stepping down. Addressing the media after the game, he could hardly keep it together.
That was my last game with the national team, and it's emotional, as you can imagine. I can't carry on. Sorry.
Doctors have called a clinical trial momentous after it showed for the first time how a drug can slow down symptoms of Alzheimer's. Experts say lecanemab works better in the very early stages, so the condition needs to be spotted straight away. The study showed decline in memory and mental agility slowed down by 27% in patients with a mild form of dementia, and the treatment could be available from late 2024. Catherine Gray from the Alzheimer's Society says although it's not a cure, this is a big moment.
These drugs are given at a very early stage of the disease, mean that you have more time at that earlier stage when your symptoms are less severe. You can't put a value on that in terms of what that would mean to families and those affected.
Christine McVie's family have led tributes to the Fleetwood Mac singer who passed away at the age of 79. Christine joined the band in 1970 and wrote many of their biggest hits, including Little Lies, Songbird and Don't Stop. They sold more than 100 million records worldwide, making them one of the most successful groups ever. In a post on Twitter, Fleetwood Mac called Christine truly one of a kind, special and talented beyond measure. She spoke to BBC Scotland earlier this year and talked about the night she wrote Songbird, but had no way to record it, so just stayed up all night. Rest in peace, Christine.
I had a lot of faith in the song. I was afraid that my memory wouldn't hold out. That was pretty terrifying, actually, to have written a song that you love and then know that you could, at any minute, forget it, because it does happen.
This has been the Standout 7, the best of the week from the Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 a.m. with the Sunday 7. Have a great rest of your weekend.